Hey, good evening. Tonight we're talking to Margaret Sims-Lynch, who is a long-term former resident of Laurel Springs, now living in Kirkwood. When did your family move into Laurel Springs?
1934.
1934. That's 78 years ago.
Yes.
Would you tell us about where you lived and a couple of your neighbors?
Yes, we lived on 923 West Atlantic Avenue. Our neighbors were Mr. Wetherill and the Mix, and of course the Samuel Jackson's Flare Factory.
Right. What do you remember about Mr. Wetherill and his bicycle shop?
I remember that he was always down there, always working, putting parts together to make one bicycle.
Yes. You could go in there with an old beat-up bicycle and for 20 cents get it rebuilt.
It was as good as new.
Yep. And how about the flare factory? Where were they using their flares, and what do you know about the making of them?
They were using the flares in the railroad stations and sending them out to home, like the army depots also. And I remember there, Barbara Smith worked there.
Yes.
And her sister worked there. And it was a productive line by the windows. But that closed. I can't recall. Do you?
It seems to me it was just after the war.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You were in a unique position to talk about the railroad because you could see the railroad from where you lived. And I remember there was a siding there, and the Laurel Beverage used to unload truckloads of beer there. What are your memories of the railroad?
True, I do. Many, 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 many trains came down those tracks, and they became a part of living close by to them, that we did not allude to the fact that there was noise coming from them. They just came by and the whistles would blow and the conductors would wave, and we thought that was wonderful if we were standing out there to wave to them as they went by. Lots of coal.
Yes, was going down to Beasley's Point for the generator.
Yes.
But I know I have memories as a young child going over to the watch box and talking to the watchman. Do you remember the watchman?
I do remember the watchman. Yes, I do.
You remember their names?
I think there was Mr. Betts, one of them.
Yes, yes.
He was earlier, and then he went on to become custodian at Princeton School in Stratford after he gave up his position as watchman. And there was a woman there, but I don't recall her name.
Her name was Bertha something.
Bertha.
She was a big black lady because I knew her well.
Yes.
And she wanted to be an engineer. Of course, in those days, that wasn't really possible.
No, not for a woman.
But that whole watch station was about as big as this table.
Oh.
They'd sit in there, and they had a potbelly stove. And as the train would clear Stratford, they'd come out and put the gates down.
Yes, they would. And you talked to them through the window.
Yes, yes.
They would raise the window, and they always liked to have company.
Yes.
I can't recall the last one who was there. Do you, Rich?
Howard.
What was his?
Howard. I don't know his last name, but he was there from the war years and beyond.
Yes, I recall that.
Was the freight station open when you were around?
It was not enclosed. It was just like a platform.
Yeah.
And people would wait there. The men would wait to go to work and come home from work. Yes. But that was on the other side.
Yes.
It was not on Western. It was on the East Atlantic.
It was on East Atlantic.
Yes.
And it was down below the crossing.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. If you think back, I remember there were two sets of rails there, trains coming in both directions, and it was pretty common, particularly in World War II and gas rationing, for everyone to meet at the railroad station and take the train into Camden and come back. Let's talk a little bit about your family. Tell me what you remember about where your father worked, where your mother worked, and raising children in Laurel Springs in the 1930s.
My father worked at the shipyard, and he also started out to be working for an oil company in Haddonfield, Brown's Oil Company. And then he went to the shipyard, and then after the shipyard he went to become maintenance for Stratford School District, and that was from where he retired. My mother didn't work until later when I was in, I guess toward the end of my high school, when she started as a dispatcher
Yes.
at the
Police station.
Yes, and that's what she did. I remember we had great times in Laurel Springs. It was a wonderful place to raise children because everyone looked out after each other and cared for each other.
Yes.
And you didn't realize that there were any differences in the world because it was just in Laurel Springs.
Yes, that's right. You started school in Laurel Springs Public School?
Yes, I did.
First, tell us what the school looked like at that point in time on the inside.
It was very, very plain. And it was Mr. Berger custodian
Yes,
at that time when I
Papa
started.
Berger, yes.
I started in a summer program and I didn't have to go to kindergarten. I just went right into first grade. And
Who was your teacher, do you remember?
I cannot recall.
No.
Garfield. I kind of think of Miss Garfield, but I'm not quite certain. And then as I went through the school system, Miss Kreitzer was our 6th and 7th grade teacher.
Became principal.
Yes, and Mrs. Fly was my 8th grade teacher. Catherine Berger also taught there in 3rd grade later on. And it was a very closely knit community as far as the school was concerned. And
The janitor of the school, Bill Berger, Papa Berger, who was also a fireman, and who would get up at 3 a.m. and stoke the boilers for school.
with coal.
With coal, was a very respected member of the community, and the kids loved him.
Absolutely.
What do you remember about Papa Berger?
He was always very, very, very nice to everyone, and he would talk with them. He also wrote to the boys, the men who were in the service too. Every single man received letters from him. He was very caring about the school and took great care of it. One person did it. He didn't have any help, but he did it perfectly.
And he mowed that huge
Grass.
lot and shoveled snow.
He did.
And greeted every child,
Right.
and was there when they arrived and was there when they left.
Absolutely, and helped the teachers. He was there more. He also, I remember when I was teaching in Laurel Springs, that he would take our checks and have them cashed at the bank and bring them back to us. But he was a wonderful man, as well as the rest of his family.
Oh, yes.
Because I think Catherine and Marion were also involved with the boys.
Catherine became a teacher. Marion was involved with the Girl Scouts.
Yes, she was.
And don't know what Marion eventually did.
I don't either. But she was with me when we were in charge of Girl Scouts and Brownies. Your mother was also involved.
My mother was a Girl
remember.
Scout leader
Yes,
in
when I
Laurel
was
Springs.
a youngster.
Troop 16, does that sound right?
Yes, she was very much involved in it.
Let's go back a step, though, to the burgers.
Right.
Do you remember the famous burger cow incident?
I do.
Tell us about the burger cow incident.
It was on a matinee afternoon, and the side doors opened up, and the
Yes.
cow came in
Right.
to the theater. And I wonder who was responsible for that.
There are a lot of names that have been surfaced over the years, and most of them say, no, not me. But in the last 10 years, at least 2 people have said, yeah, me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that going to be divulged to us? The mystery people, the mystery boys, or whoever?
Not really.
Oh,
Not
all
really.
right.
They're also out of town at this point in
Oh,
time.
all right.
But Mr. Berger, Papa Berger, had a little farmstead of about, an acre or so,
Yes,
fenced in, and
yes.
had a cow there. And everybody knew the cow. And the movies ran every Saturday with a matinee. And kids being kids decided it would be a great idea to put the cow in the movies. And that has become Laurel Springs folklore.
But it was true.
Oh, absolutely, it was true.
I was there
Yeah,
when it happened. Of course, what happens when children see something foreign come in the side door, which they're
Yep.
screeching and screaming, and oh my goodness,
And what did you pay to get into the movies?
10 cents.
10 cents. Oh, you were in the later ones. Because there were times it was as early as 7 cents.
7 cents, yes. I went to the 10 cent
What
one.
did you see on an average matinee for 10 cents?
For 10 cents, you would see the news.
Yep.
You would see cartoon.
Mhm.
You would also see a chapter of one of the running, like Tom Mix or one of those areas, and then you would see the main movie. But you also received a dish
Yes.
many times when you would go. Not every Saturday. There's certain Saturdays you receive a dish or a cup for the china.
And I know there are still some of those dishes around, and
I'm
long-time
sure.
residents in
I'm
Laurel
sure.
Springs have them, yes. Now, you were very close to the center of town, so I'm sure you remember Laurel Springs National Bank, which is no longer there.
No.
What can you tell us about Laurel Springs National Bank?
I remember it's being decorated for Halloween. All these things would just appear.
That was more Laurel Springs folklore.
Oh, it was just. But do you remember the buffalo that came one
Yes,
time?
yes.
Who brought that? I wonder.
It was called the Buffalo Farm over on a Black Horse Pike.
Yes.
Someone who had David Bear, I think was the name, who was a politician of some sort, countywide or statewide, and he collected taxidermy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he passed on, and these things became available. And how did they become available? They were set out for the dump.
Right, they were. Yes.
And Laurel Springs kids saw it, and what did they do with them?
Brought them to the bank.
All over the place.
Honestly, things you could never imagine would be brought there.
Yep.
That was.
Anybody who had any real junk, and I mean real junk they wanted to get rid of, Mischief Night, it arrived at the bank.
Mm-hmm, it did.
And it got so that there were people coming through town to see the decoration of the bank.
That's very true. Word got around and everyone had to come down.
And it was in the newspapers.
That's true.
And your father-in-law was a newspaper man. You want to talk a little bit about Fred?
Yes, he was. He was a wonderful newspaper man. He had a mind which was very astute, very brilliant. And I remember going there when I was a youngster, and he would be doing the typewriter with two fingers and going lickety-split faster than anyone I'd ever seen. Very organized, very well organized. But he enjoyed his Fords.
Yes.
And the Fords would always take that corner, West Atlantic Avenue, going onto Stone Road, on a sure two wheels.
Yes.
And
He
he'd be
was,
zipping away.
I would not say a defensive driver.
But he had a good time.
He also held another office in the town.
He was chief of police.
Yes.
$1 a year, wasn't it?
$1 a year. How long was he
Volunteer.
chief of police? Do you remember?
Quite a while, I think. It was. The deal was. I think about maybe 5 years. Am I going to say
About-
longer than that?
That sounds right.
Yes.
And the office was out of the police station.
Mm-hmm.
Was a desk at 442 Tomlinson Avenue.
That's where it was.
And there was the fire bell there, and his wife, Ray, was around when he wasn't, and if there was a fire call, she'd hit the button,
Yes, she
and then
would.
they'd run over to the firehouse and tell them where the fire was.
Yes,
Yep.
that's how it happened. And it worked well
Yes, it worked well.
in those days.
What did the police department look like in those days?
We only had they were all volunteers. Did we
Yep.
have 4 or 5? Did we have, I think?
Yep.
Each one received $1.
Yes,
I think Harold Dean was on.
yes,
My dad was on.
yes. My father was
Your
one.
dad was on.
I think Edgar
Dale was
Sable
on.
was one.
I think so. I can't recall the others. They covered each night. Each gentleman had the
Yep.
town to cover. I don't think we had too much crime.
Not really. The only time you mobilized the troops were Mischief Night.
Mischief nights,
Yep.
yes, that's true.
And Mischief Night, anyone who had something outside made sure they got it inside or it would disappear, and guess where it would arrive? At the
Right,
bank.
the bank. Do we have any pictures of those nights?
There are many pictures in the Courier and the Inquirer Rogues Gallery, the morgue,
Oh,
and they can be had.
all right.
Most of them are, 40 years old or so? Yeah.
Yes. Maybe even longer than that.
All right, let's talk about your family and schooling and your background in Laurel Springs.
I attended school to 8th grade, and when I graduated from 8th grade, Rich, there were 15 people in my class. And we made our dresses to graduate in sewing class. We thoroughly enjoyed sewing class. That was an introduction for all of us. In fact, I also believe we had a wood making class, did we? Because it
Don't know.
was
Not
a
sure.
metal. It could have been metal.
Yeah, could be.
But we had that. The boys and the girls were involved, and we were allowed, as girls, we were permitted to take the metal. The boys did not do the sewing.
Yeah, it was as I remember back, it was a wood shop.
Is it a wood
Mainly.
shop?
It was a wood
All
shop.
right.
And Bud Johnson, who the Johnson family lived in Laurel Springs, he was the instructor 1 day a week.
Yes, yes,
I don't know what he did the rest of the time. I know he was going to school to become an administrator.
yes, that's true. He did that. And we had, we also had what they called release time when I was going through the public school for Bible study. Mrs. Rexon took care of
Yes.
that, and we signed up for that.
Which Mrs. Rexon was the wife of the farmer who owned the land where UMD now sits.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, where we used to sled.
Yes. And
We
ice
did
skate
that.
down on the cow pasture would get wet and
Yes.
freeze, and people would ice skate. And through the summer, they go out and hit a golf ball out there. The Rexons were not too fond of
Yes,
golf
that's
balls and
true.
cows.
That's true.
Yeah.
I remember our classes were we had combined classes, I think 3rd and 4th grade.
Mhm.
Then we had 6th and 7th combined, large classes.
Mhm.
Then 8th grade was by itself, which was very
Yeah.
small. But
Do you remember any of the activities that took place?
yes, I do. Within the school district, we would have May Day
Mhm.
every year. And then we also would have minstrels.
Mhm.
And then at Christmas time, one of the churches would present the live nativity scene.
Right.
And they would have
Yes.
that for one of the PTA
Mhm.
meetings. PTA was very active in Laurel Springs
Yes.
at that time, supported the teachers and the children. We had a school safety patrol. Which
It was state police sponsored.
Yes, it was, and you wore badges, and you were
Yes.
very proud to be crossing the children at their
Yes.
corners.
Once a month, the state trooper would arrive and meet with
Yes.
first the safety patrol, then the school.
Yes.
That was a big day.
Yes, it was a
Yep.
big day, and we enjoyed doing that.
How about sports or whatever?
We did not have organized sports in
No.
the school district. We just had these wonderful games we played, and there was volleyball and
Right.
soccer and softball,
Mhm.
and they were all integrated within the school
Yes.
at that time. But I think the town maybe later on had organized softball.
It came much later.
Much later,
Much
yes.
later. I would say 60s, somewhere
All
in
right,
there.
all right.
And we're talking about basically 40s
Mhm.
and early 50s.
We just had a wonderful time playing together, not being organized.
Yes.
Did a lot of bicycling around the
Mhm.
town, jump rope, all those
Mhm.
games that
Oh,
children
yes.
play. We thoroughly enjoyed that.
You were very active in your church. Would you like to talk about the church a little bit?
Yes, Episcopal Church of the Atonement, we celebrated a few years ago our 100th anniversary. Struggled at first, met in a house, built on a land which was inundated with springs underneath, and we have had water problems up to this day, but we
Yes.
think last year we solved it. We had a small congregation, but we managed to go through all the problems that churches do and
Mhm.
come out. We had some of the people at town, Brossics were members,
Mhm.
Dresslers, Wise, Smiths, Bilson. In fact, Mayor Wise was our mayor.
Yes, Al Wise.
Yes, when I guess I was a youngster at that time too. But the church also involved itself in the Good Samaritan Center in Camden, involved itself in the orphanage which was in Camden on, there used to be a girls' orphanage it was. In fact, the Girl Scouts went there a couple of times from Laurel Springs. And the Father Waldo Parker was the priest at the time. I
Reverend
was there.
Waldo, everybody called
Reverend
him.
Waldo, yes. He preferred being called Mr.
Yeah. He was there for quite a period of time.
He was.
Yeah.
He was there for about 10 years,
Yes.
and then we went into Father Trask. Father Parker was a tutor for Theodore Roosevelt's children
Oh, that's interesting.
before he became he became a priest.
Yep.
He was in the business world at that time. Of course, in the kitchens were involved. Mr. Kitchen was our
Yes.
choir director. wonderful, wonderful voice. He was also involved, I believe, in the railroad
Yes.
choir, was he not?
Yes. He worked for the railroad
Yes, yes,
because I remember he got to ride the trains free.
yes.
And
That's
the
true.
train cost was minimal in those days.
Now, Mr. Brosick owned the,
Laurel Beverage.
yes,
Yep.
and that's why the beverages would come into our siding
Yep.
for his picking it up.
There would be literally a boxcar full of Budweiser, and then they would unload it into trucks and run it over to Laurel Beverage, which was White Horse Pike and Broadway on
Right.
the Livermore side.
Right.
And that would happen, that would take 2 days or so. And from there, pretty soon the rail car, the boxcar would leave, and a new one would arrive. Obviously, they sold a lot of beer
A
in
lot.
Laurel Springs.
Well, let's hope that other towns came by, but they did. He was always quite a jovial man, too. He really was.
And there were hopper cars, coal cars that
Yes.
came in periodically.
And they were left,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, they were just kind of stored there.
That's true.
But the railroad was very active through both your and my youth.
It was
And
Rich.
it was not unusual to see 2 trains, one going in either direction at the same time at rush hour.
It was always fascinating for us to be able to count the cars.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there would be engines at the beginning and engines at the end.
What do you remember about the shopping district in Laurel Springs?
Well, the shopping district was rather small.
Mhm.
I think that Albrecht's
Yes.
owned the newsstand. And then I think, did Artie and Mabel Normandin come
Artie
after
Norman
that?
took over, yes.
After that, yes. I remember there was a dress shop there where the post office, after the post office left. Remember the dress shop?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Not
that
well,
was-
but I remember, yes.
well, it was. It didn't stay
Was it
very long.
Mrs. Rossi?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
And they lived over on Chestnut.
Yes, they did.
And
That's true.
her daughter is Dee Weimer, who lives in Hynella.
Yes, that's
Who
correct.
was a teacher.
Yes, and her husband also was.
As Chuck was a teacher,
yes,
too. Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then there was, there was, I'm going to call it a Five and Dime, but it's probably like a dry goods store. And then at the end of the, well, I don't think the Bakers came later, though, did they not?
Bakers came after World War II.
Yes. So they were not there before. But
No.
what was at the end? Was that just a not used at all?
No, it was used, but I don't remember
Appliance?
what was in there, to tell
I
you
don't
the
either.
truth.
Now, did Mrs. Van Dorn have a copper kettle?
Mrs. Van Dorn first ran or worked in the 5 and 10. And the copper kettle was Denby's store.
Right.
Denby's, as I remember Mr. Denby, it was a husband-wife store, and they were
Right.
quite old.
Yes, they were. They had married.
And they passed on, and I think the next generation took over and basically sold it off. And it didn't do much until the copper kettle was developed, and Mrs. Van Dorn, maybe,
What they called your
Mary,
grandma?
Mary Van
Mary
Dorn.
Van Dorn.
took over the copper kettle. She was a good cook.
Yes, she was.
We've interviewed a couple of her offspring.
Really? Oh, good.
Former chief of police Larry and her
Dolly.
Dolly.
Dolly
But
Van
we've interviewed
Dorn.
both of those. And the Copper Kettle was a pretty good restaurant. And it was a family type restaurant.
Was.
To the point that occasionally on holidays, she would rent out the restaurant, cook the Thanksgiving turkey
For
dinner.
us.
For us, yes.
She did it for us,
And would
yes.
come in, everyone would come in, and you could have dinner and spend whatever time you wanted, and you had the place to yourself.
Right. When we became too
Yep.
big as a family,
Yep.
we went to there for
That's
dinner.
right, yes.
Yes, I remember that.
But it was quite an interesting place, and of course people stopped in as they came and they went. And in my youth, Artie's which was Obrecht, had a full soda fountain.
Yes,
One of
he-
these real
yes.
ones like you see in the movies.
yes, you had to make, yes.
Yes,
He did. Yes, he did.
and that was where all of the kids headed immediately after school.
I remember the penny candy, too.
Yes.
Penny candy, you stop and you just look at all that candy and
Right.
decide, now, what do I want?
If you had a nickel, you were in hog
I
heaven.
know. I remember those little tin things which was filled with something, a little
Yep,
tiny spoon.
Yep, yes.
But
yes.
and you'd be able to choose the proper. Oh, that was.
And he
the
also
days.
sold tobacco.
Yes, he did.
And at Christmas time, all of the kids went to Artie's and bought a cigar for Papa Burger.
That's true.
And
I
the
remember,
line would
yes.
be, what kind of cigar does Papa Burger sell or like? So anything that was left that he wanted to get rid of, it's that kind.
But you know, I never saw him smoke.
No,
Did you ever see his smoking?
no, I've never saw him smoke. He
No.
was always a thin
At home.
individual.
Yes.
And he put up a sign about, we have a heart, and we called him Big-Hearted Artie. And he was a character.
Yes, he was.
Yes,
He
yes.
was.
What other people in town do you generally remember?
I remember Mrs. Mauer.
All right, yes.
Mrs. Mauer would come to our church, and then she would go down the Presbyterian church. She would cover. They used to call her. What was the name that gave her this name? Oh gosh, I can't recall that. But she would always drive on the wrong side of the street, and you'd
But
hopefully.
it didn't matter in those days.
No, you could drive on any side. You could drive on the
That's right.
sidewalk if you wished. And of course the Smiths. I remember the Smiths and Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker was very well known at the church and did much for the church. And he married a Quaker. Cora Walker was a Quaker, and of course he was the Episcopalian. But and I think that she was a Tompkinson, was she not?
I believe so.
Yes, and she had been living across the street in the academy,
Mm-hmm.
and then she moved into the other house. But whom else do I? Oh, the Jones
Yes.
family, very well known, very. All the families we knew, the Caras, the Fredericks, all those persons.
While we're at it, we should mention the members of your immediate family.
Oh, all right. Let's see. I have Ralph. Ralph is in Florida, living in Florida. Earl is in Florida. Joni's in Laurel Springs. Bobby is in Summerdale. Billy is in Lindenwold. Eileen is in Williamstown now, in a retirement community. Virginia's still in Laurel Springs. And my two brothers, Richard and Edward, are deceased. But we had great times together. Everyone liked to come to our home. There was never a question about asking our parents if we could have someone come, because Mother would always say, you can always add something more to the pot.
That's right.
To feed
Yep.
people. But we had a great time together.
And talk about your immediate family.
Oh, my family.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see. I have I married Dale Lynch, and I have Dale Jr.
Dale Lynch was a very interesting individual because he was a double amputee with a military accident at, 21?
Yes.
And he had the
The Air
best attitude. It never slowed him down. He drove a manual transmission truck. He water skied. He camped. He did all kinds of things.
Yes, he did.
And he always had a positive attitude.
Yes, thank you for saying that.
Yep.
But he did. And it's come down to his children, too. He's always very dedicated to community activities.
Yes.
Always, from day one. And his son is the same way. And then I have Dawn, who is a pediatric nurse, but is now doing substitution in Voorhees Township in the nurse's office. And then Beth teaches in Cherry Hill. And I have 6 grandchildren.
And where are they?
Well, my oldest granddaughter is in California, graduate of USC. My next grandchild is a graduate of Drexel and is now living in Virginia and married to a seminarian student. My next grandchild is Travis, our cowboy, who's going to the University of Wyoming. That's Dale's son. And then Adam is going to the University of Maryland, taking neuroscience. And then Alexander is a sophomore. And then Joshua, my youngest, is a 4th grader.
It's hard to keep track of them.
I know. I really need a scorecard sometimes,
Yes,
name
yes.
tags. But
And you're residing now in Kirkwood
yes.
with several immediate family members in the immediate area.
Yes. Next door to us.
Yes. We're rapidly coming to the end here. Is there anything that you can think of that you would like to tell us about that relates to the town, your family, or your occupation?
Well, let's see. I think Laurel Springs is an absolutely delightful town in which to raise children up until I've not been back as far as living here, but I've close ties with it, even though I'm not a resident. And it's always been a caring community, as far as I see. Is it still?
Still,
Do you
yes.
feel that way?
It's a bedroom community more than it was before, but there's still the element in the town that helps people out. I remember one dentist who remained nameless because he would like to remain nameless. Anytime there was someone in the town who had a need, he would arrange for an intermediate to present them with whatever the need was. I remember I took a heater to a family that he asked me to deliver and not say who paid for it. And that was very common. He did this many, many, many times, and no one really knew, except for those people who helped out, who paid for it or who supplied it. And there is that group in the town that still does that kind of thing, which is really neat.
That is neat. And I also find that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, such as you, Rich, are very caring for this community. Fred cared for this community. Randy cared for this community. All the families of the Lynches, the Zimmermans, Sims cared for the community.
Yes.
And that, I think, is important for a community to remember.
Yes, I think you find a lot of that in Laurel Springs, particularly in the older generations. And we're getting older by the minute. Well, we thank you so much for your
Rich,
time,
thank you.
And we hope it would be interesting.
I hope so.
And at this point in time, we will conclude the tape, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Rich, thank you for asking me. I really appreciate that.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank
plus,
you. It really
plus
has.
all of the discussions we've had that led up to this, which has really been interesting.
It's been very interesting. I appreciate that very much, and I'm honored. Thank you.